It is 2 hours before dawn. Your backyard is completely still. The feeder hangs motionless in the darkness. The birdbath holds a perfect, undisturbed circle of black water. Nothing moves. You could stand at your window and be absolutely certain, based on everything you know, everything that seems reasonable, that the birds in your neighborhood are asleep somewhere nearby, roost in the same hedges and tree cavities they have used for weeks. The house sparrows are tucked into the eaves. The cardinals are somewhere in the dense privet at the back of your lot. The chickadees are in the woodpile cavity you noticed last autumn. They are here. They are close. They are still. And then you look up. And 30 feet above your house, invisible against the dark sky, something is moving that will not stop moving until it reaches a place it has never been before, using a map that scientists have studied for decades and still cannot fully read. This is not a metaphor. It is not a poetic way of saying birds travel south in autumn. What happens in the night sky above ordinary backyards, above suburbs, above city parks, above the fields you drive past without looking up, is one of the most precisely documented and least understood phenomena in the whole of biology. We know it happens. We can count it. We can track individual birds through it with geolocators smaller than a thumbnail. We have radar systems that watch billions of birds move across entire continents in a single night. Peer-reviewed studies from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, from Lund University in Sweden, from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology in Germany have measured it, mapped it, and confirmed it at scales that are genuinely difficult to hold in the mind. What we cannot fully explain is how it works at the level of a single bird. The navigation. The timing. The internal architecture of a system so precise that it has survived 50 million years of continental change, and still functions, every autumn, in the skull of a bird that weighs less than a first-class letter. If you stay with this video through to the final section, you will encounter a fact about what is happening in the sky above your house right now, on an ordinary night in an ordinary season, that is going to make it very difficult to look at the darkness outside the same way again. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Most people who watch backyard birds assume that migration is something that happens to other birds. The dramatic ones. The long-haul species. The ones you see mentioned in National Geographic, Arctic terns crossing entire oceans, bar-tailed godwits flying from Alaska to New Zealand without landing. The birds at your feeder, the thinking goes, are local birds. They stay. They are residents. Migration is someone else's story. The scientific reality is considerably stranger than this. Research published by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology using the Birdcast Radar Migration System, a network that maps bird movement across North America in real time using weather surveillance radar, has confirmed that many of the species visiting typical suburban backyards are migrants. Not all of them, and not all year round. But during the migration windows of April through May and late August through October, the birds passing directly over an ordinary suburban yard on a single night can number in the thousands. On peak migration nights, Birdcast researchers have documented over 500 million individual birds moving across the continental United States in a single 12-hour period. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the vast majority of these birds are flying in complete darkness, at altitudes between 500 and 2,000 feet, through skies that contain no landmarks they have ever followed before, and a significant fraction of them are making this journey for the very first time, as birds hatched only months earlier, with no older bird guiding them. The mechanism that tells them where to go exists entirely inside them. And we do not know, at the level of neurological mechanism, how it actually operates. The conventional understanding of how birds navigate at night tends to lean on one answer: the stars. Birds look up, they see the night sky, they orient by the position of the North Star or the general rotation of the stellar canopy, and they fly in the correct direction. It is a clean, satisfying explanation. It has the ring of something solved. The scientific reality is more layered. In the 1960s, German ornithologist Emlen demonstrated in a now famous series of experiments that indigo buntings do, in fact, learn to use the stellar rotation pattern during their first summer of life, imprinting on the point around which the stars appear to rotate, which in the northern hemisphere is close to Polaris. These birds showed consistent orientation toward that fixed point during autumn migration. This part is confirmed, replicated, and not seriously disputed. But here is where the confirmed science collides with the unresolved mystery. Subsequent research, most notably from Henrik Moritzon's laboratory at the University of Oldenburg in Germany, has demonstrated that migratory birds also possess a magnetic compass, a sensory system that detects the inclination angle of the Earth's magnetic field and converts it into directional information. This compass appears to operate through a quantum mechanical process involving specialized proteins called cryptochromes, located in the bird's eye, that are sensitive to the polarization state of incoming light and may actually allow the bird to see the magnetic field as a visual overlay. A paper published in the journal Nature in 2019 confirmed that the cryptochrome protein Cry4 in European robins is the likely molecular basis of this magnetic sensitivity. The mechanism is real. The molecule has been identified. And what scientists still cannot explain is how the bird integrates these two systems, the stellar map and the magnetic compass, into a single coherent navigational decision. Where do these signals converge in the brain? How does the bird weigh one against the other when they conflict? When a European robin is disoriented by the electromagnetic interference of an AM radio tower, which researchers at Oldenburg confirmed disrupts magnetic orientation at intensities far below safety thresholds for humans, what exactly is being disrupted at the level of neural processing? The answer is not known. What makes this genuinely strange is this: we have identified the molecule. We know it responds to magnetic fields through a quantum process. We cannot yet trace what happens between that photochemical reaction in the eye and the moment the bird turns left instead of right in the dark sky above your house. There is a behavior that occurs in the final days before a migratory bird departs that most backyard bird watchers have noticed without having a name for it. The bird becomes restless at night. It hops. It flutters. It moves within its cage or, in wild birds, within its roost, repeatedly orienting in the direction it will soon travel. German researchers studying this in the 19th century gave it a name that has remained in the scientific literature ever since: Zugenruhe. Migration restlessness. It is the outward expression of an internal biological clock shifting into a new state. What drives Zugenruhe is, in its broad architecture, understood. The lengthening or shortening of daylight hours triggers hormonal changes mediated by the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Melatonin cycles shift. Gonadal activity changes. The bird's body mass increases. Migratory birds undergo a process called hyperphagia, dramatically increasing food intake to deposit fat reserves as fuel. A blackpoll warbler preparing for its transoceanic Atlantic crossing will double its body weight in a matter of days, going from approximately 11 grams to 22 grams, almost entirely in fat. It will then fly non-stop from the coast of New England to South America, a journey of roughly 2,500 kilometers over open ocean, burning that fuel at a rate that keeps it aloft for up to 90 hours without landing, without drinking, without sleeping in any conventional sense. Pause on that number for a moment. 90 hours. A bird that weighs, fully loaded for this journey, approximately 22 grams. Flying non-stop over open ocean for 90 hours. For comparison, the fuel efficiency of this crossing, calories burned per unit of body weight per kilometer, is more efficient than any internal combustion engine humans have built at any scale. A 2010 study published in the AUK calculated that if a blackpoll warbler were a car, it would achieve the equivalent of 720,000 miles per gallon. What makes this genuinely strange is this: what is happening in the brain during those 90 hours is not well understood. The bird is not sleeping. But its brain is not in normal waking mode either. Research from the Niels Rattenborg group at the Max Planck Institute has documented a state called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, where one hemisphere of the brain enters a sleep-like state while the other remains active, in birds in flight. Whether migratory birds engage this during long transoceanic crossings, and what that means for their navigation during those hours, remains an open question. Of all the confirmed but unexplained behaviors in migratory birds, the one that most consistently stops researchers is this: first-year birds migrate successfully without any prior experience and without the guidance of older birds. In many migratory species, the adults and the juveniles travel at different times, via different routes. In the European blackcap warbler, a species that winters partly in sub-Saharan Africa and partly in the British Isles, a split that has been extensively studied by Peter Berthold at the Max Planck Institute since the 1980s, the direction of migration is genetically encoded. Blackcaps raised in captivity, with no exposure to experienced birds and no opportunity to observe the sun or stars during the critical early weeks, will still orient in the species' typical migratory direction when Zuggenroh begins. Crossbreed a blackcap from a westward migrating British wintering population with one from a southwesterly migrating African wintering population, and the offspring orients in a direction intermediate between the two parents' directions, as if the compass bearing were inherited the way eye color is inherited. The destination is, in some meaningful sense, encoded in the genome. But this raises a question that no one has resolved: the genome encodes a direction and a duration. It does not encode a map. A first-year bird flying southwest for 30 nights will arrive somewhere in that general region, but how does it know it has arrived? How does it recognize a place it has never been as the place it was going? Researchers studying this have proposed that birds carry a magnetic map, a sense not just of which direction magnetic north lies, but of the absolute values of magnetic field intensity and inclination angle, which vary predictably across the Earth's surface and could theoretically function as coordinates. Evidence for this exists. A 2013 study published in Current Biology demonstrated that Eurasian reed warblers displaced to a location with the magnetic signature of a site 1,000 kilometers east of their migratory path reoriented in a direction consistent with correcting for that displacement, as if they read the magnetic coordinates and recalculated. But the neural structure that performs this calculation has not been found. What makes this genuinely strange is this: we have shown the behavior. We have identified the likely sensory input. The brain region that converts that input into spatial knowledge, the equivalent of a GPS receiver in the skull of a bird, remains unlocated. It is 2 hours before dawn. Your backyard is completely still. You know this now, with the kind of knowledge that changes what stillness means. The feeder hangs in the dark. The birdbath holds its circle of black water. And 30 feet above your roof, and 300 feet above that, and perhaps 1,000 feet above that, the night sky is not empty. It is filled with birds flying over a map they carry inside them, a map drawn partly in starlight, partly in magnetic field lines they perceive through a quantum process in their eyes, partly in a genetic instruction set that encodes a direction and a distance into the architecture of their nervous systems before they have ever flown a single mile. We can count them. On peak migration nights in October, Birdcast estimates that more than 1 billion birds are in the air over North America simultaneously. 1 billion. Moving through the dark above ordinary neighborhoods, above sleeping cities, above fields and highways and backyards where feeders hang undisturbed. The yard is the same yard it was this morning. The science is the same science it was before you started watching. What is different is the quality of the darkness above it. What is different is understanding that the stillness you are looking at is, in a precise and documented sense, not still at all, and that the mechanism making all of that movement possible is one of the last genuinely unsolved problems in the biology of the vertebrate brain. Stand at your window tonight. Look up. You are not looking at empty sky. You are looking at the edge of something that 50 years of rigorous science has confirmed is real, and has not yet fully explained. I want to ask you something specific. Have you ever been outside at night, late autumn, clear sky, maybe no particular reason you were there, and heard something above you that you could not see? A thin, high-contact call, a brief soft note from the darkness, and then nothing. That is a nocturnal flight call. Every migratory species produces a slightly different one. If you have heard it and remember the night it happened, tell me in the comments. I read every one.